I met Leah in the middle of a thunderstorm. It was one of those summer storms that comes out of nowhere and soaks everything before you have time to curse the sky. I just left a networking event downtown, tie loosened, umbrella forgotten in the car, and ducked into a cafe to dry off. She was already there, hunched over a half-drunk cappuccino, tapping away at her phone with wet bangs stuck to her forehead. The place was packed, but she looked up, caught me scanning the room, and without hesitation slid her bag off the opposite chair. "Sit," she said. "You look like a wet dog." I did. And I sat. We talked for almost 2 hours. She was magnetic, quick-witted, self-deprecating, with this glimmer in her eye like she was always 5 seconds ahead of everyone in the room. She worked in event marketing, was fresh off a long-term breakup, and said she hated small talk but loved storms. That made me smile. By the end of the night, I had her number. By the end of the month, we were inseparable. I was 31. She was 28. We got married 18 months later at a vineyard just outside Charlottesville. A perfect fall day, orange leaves, low sun, friends and family wrapped in scarves and wine smiles. She wore a lace dress that made every camera jealous. I couldn't stop staring at her. We moved into a modest 2-story in Arlington. I was running operations for a commercial construction firm, and she launched her own boutique agency not long after. Leah was relentless when she wanted something. Within 2 years, her client list included several big-name lifestyle brands, and she was featured in Washingtonian as a local creative to watch. We had our daughter, Zoe, 4 years into the marriage. That changed everything, but in the best ways. Leah surprised me. She hadn't been sure about kids, but once Zoe arrived, she transformed. Balanced feedings and meetings, preschool schedules and pitch decks, and made it all look effortless. I'd come home to Lego forts, lullabies in the kitchen, and the occasional bottle of Cab left breathing on the counter with 2 glasses beside it. By the time Zoe turned 5, Leah's business had grown to a team of 10, and mine had landed a federal contract that doubled our annual revenue. We weren't flashy, but we were comfortable. Solid. We hosted dinners. Went on family trips. Bought a golden retriever. Paid off the second car. Argued occasionally but always found our way back to the same page. We were the couple that others said had it together. And most days, it felt like we did. She was the kind of person people remembered, graceful, poised, sharp in all the right ways. I never worried about her. Never questioned her intentions. If anything, I admired her ability to be both ambitious and grounded. She never chased the spotlight. She let it come to her. And when it did, I stood proudly just behind it, happy to let her shine. Because I trusted her. I loved her. Our life moved like clockwork, but never felt mechanical. That was Leah's doing. She had this way of making structure feel like spontaneity. Mornings were early. Zoe was always up by 6:30, padding down the hall with her blanket over one shoulder, ready to drag us both into the day. Leah handled breakfast. I handled backpacks and shoelaces. On good mornings, we were out the door by 8, Zoe dropped off at her school just a few blocks from the house. After that, we split off, me to the office, her to wherever her calendar took her. Most days we'd check in briefly around noon, just a text or two, "How's your day?" Client meeting running long. Sometimes she'd send a photo of Zoe's latest drawing or a joke one of her assistants told. It wasn't flashy communication. But it kept us tethered. Weeknights were for family. Dinners around the table, messy crafts, movie nights with popcorn Zoe never finished. We took turns reading to her at bedtime, and once she was down, we'd retreat to the living room with a bottle of wine or watch something until we both nodded off halfway through. It wasn't perfect, nothing is, but it was ours. And I liked who we were in it. Leah's business was still growing. She'd recently picked up a few national contracts, and her team had started flying out to handle launches in New York, Chicago, LA. I was proud of her. She managed everything without letting it consume her. When she traveled, she kept Zoe grounded, calling every night, video chats from hotel rooms, little gifts brought home in her suitcase. I didn't travel as much. My role kept me close to the ground, overseeing sites, managing client accounts, keeping our contractors on schedule. It suited me. I liked being home. I liked being Zoe's rock and Leah's quiet support. I never once resented her for the attention she was getting. In fact, I loved being behind the scenes. I liked knowing that the woman others admired came home to me. Financially, we were doing better than ever. We'd refinanced the house last year, invested in a vacation property in Asheville, and started talking seriously about planning a trip abroad, maybe Europe, maybe Japan. Zoe was old enough to travel well now, and we wanted her to see the world. We had a few couple friends, mostly neighbors or parents we'd met through Zoe's school. We hosted small dinners, nothing extravagant. Leah always made sure there was a signature cocktail. She had a thing for little details, menus printed on thick cardstock, playlists curated down to the second. That was Leah, effortlessly elegant in ways I could never replicate. But I didn't need to. That wasn't my role. I was the balance. The anchor. The one who handled the messy stuff, the heavy lifting, the hard decisions. I was okay not being the star. She had charm. I had steadiness. Together, we worked. We were settled, successful, and in sync. Leah always moved like she had a mission, even when it looked like she was just browsing the farmer's market or letting Zoe braid her hair on the porch. She had a presence, a kind of natural gravity that pulled people in. When we were first married, I used to joke that she was the kind of woman you couldn't walk beside without someone stopping to ask for directions or compliment her shoes. It never let up. People just gravitated toward her. But what I admired most was that she didn't need the attention. She never chased it. Never flaunted what she had. She liked beautiful things, sure, she had an eye for design, loved silk blouses and minimalist jewelry, but she didn't post for likes or care about applause. She was just, effortlessly magnetic. And despite that, despite the constant orbit of people around her, she always came home grounded. She left her ego at the door. We had a ritual, shoes off, blazer hung up, kiss on the cheek, and then she'd drop onto the couch with a sigh and say, "Talk to me. I've been surrounded by voices all day, but none of them were yours." That meant something. Especially coming from someone like her. Zoe adored her. I'd catch them some evening sprawled out on the floor, building blanket forts or arranging tiny tea parties with stuffed animals in attendance. Leah had a way of making Zoe feel like the center of the universe, even when her phone was buzzing and emails were piling up. She compartmentalized better than anyone I'd ever seen. Still, the stress crept in sometimes. Leah rarely admitted it, but I knew when the pressure started wearing her down. Her shoulders would stiffen. Her sleep would shorten. She'd say, "I'm fine," a little too fast, smile a little too wide. That's when I'd take the lead, extra time with Zoe, picking up dinner, surprising her with a weekend off. She never asked. But I knew. We supported each other in a rhythm we'd built over the years. She handled the forward-facing parts of our life, the polished, the planned, the presentable. I kept the wheels turning quietly underneath. It worked. More than that, it made us feel like a team. There were times we felt tired, sure. Sometimes I'd get home late, and she'd already be upstairs reading, the lamp casting a pool of yellow light over her shoulder. Sometimes I'd wake up early to an empty bed and find her downstairs answering emails over cold coffee. But we always reconnected. Little rituals, a hand on the back as we passed in the hall, an inside joke mumbled at the school fundraiser, her foot brushing against mine under the dinner table. Even when we were busy, I never felt far from her. That's why I didn't worry when she started attending more industry events, conferences, panels, fundraisers hosted by clients I'd only heard about in headlines. Her world was expanding. That was the dream, wasn't it? She was growing into the person I'd always believed she could be. And I was proud to be standing beside her, quietly keeping pace. Leah was invited to speak at a leadership summit in New York that spring. It was her first major public appearance, keynote slot, spotlight, front row packed with CEOs and executives. I flew up with her, partly to show support, partly just to watch her in her element. Zoe stayed with my sister for the weekend and sent us video messages of her stuffed animals' adventures around the house. The event was held in a glass-walled venue in Soho, with those heavy lanyards and branded gift bags that make everything feel a little more official than it needs to. Leah was calm backstage, going over her notes with one AirPod in, half listening to whatever playlist helped her focus. She didn't need me in that moment. I knew that. But I was there anyway, and when she stepped onto the stage, I watched the whole room straighten in their chairs. She spoke for 23 minutes. No slides. No cue cards. Just her voice, measured, natural, confident. She talked about branding through authenticity, about real connection in a digital world, about storytelling with integrity. She had them the whole way. When she finished, people stood. Not just polite applause. Real, full standing ovation. A few came up afterward, asking her to autograph their program. I stood to the side, hands in my pockets, smiling quietly like I always did when she shined. That was a good weekend. We stayed an extra night, had dinner at a rooftop place with string lights and jazz humming from a nearby bar. She wore a black dress that she hadn't worn since before Zoe was born, and I told her she looked like the kind of woman who could run the world. She kissed me across the table and said, "Only if you're in it." That's how it was with us. I knew who I married. And I never tried to slow her down. When we got back home, things picked up. Her calendar filled, panels, strategy sessions, consultations with clients who now introduced her by name like she was someone to know. She handled it all with ease. But she never let it pull her too far. She was still at the school science fair the next Friday, crouched on the cafeteria floor with Zoe, building a baking soda volcano. We still had our nights. Still talked about nothing for an hour over wine. Still teased each other during morning routines and made time for slow Sundays with breakfast in pajamas and cartoons playing on low volume. I handled the house, the schedules, the repairs, and the bills. She handled her team, her brand, and the momentum. Together, it just worked. People started recognizing her at restaurants, in airports. Once, while we were out getting coffee, a young woman stopped her and said, "You changed the way I think about leadership." Leah thanked her without missing a beat, then turned to me and said, "Let's get muffins too. We deserve them." We laughed, and we did. We were happy. Not the kind of happy that gets posted or posed for. The kind that's built, day after day, in the ordinary moments people overlook. It started with a single morning where she didn't say goodbye. Nothing dramatic. No slamming doors. No cold shoulder. Just an early client call, her voice low and fast as she tiptoed around the house while I packed Zoe's lunch. She mouthed "love you" from the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, and I nodded, brushing peanut butter across toast. The next few days moved fast. Leah had 2 back-to-back speaking engagements, one in Boston, one in Atlanta. She flew out early, came back late, and I didn't think twice about it. I had Zoe, a job of my own, and plenty to keep me busy. But I noticed she wasn't calling as often from the road. Usually she'd FaceTime before bed, ask to say goodnight to Zoe, tell me how the hotel food sucked or how she hated packing heels. This time, it was short texts. Landed safely. Busy day. Love you. So tired, more tomorrow. Nothing wrong with that. Just, less of what there used to be. When she got home, she was exhausted. I could see it in her face. Not just tired from travel, but somewhere else in her mind. She hugged Zoe tight, kissed me, and smiled, but I could tell her head was still halfway on a stage, in a meeting, in some room I hadn't been in. I tried not to make it about me. She was in demand now. She'd earned that. The space she needed wasn't a rejection, it was just growth, I told myself. I figured I'd give her some air, and she'd come back when things calmed down. A week later, I noticed she had a new bracelet. Thin, gold, minimal, exactly her taste. I hadn't bought it. When I asked where it came from, she smiled and said, "A gift bag from the Atlanta event. One of the sponsors." That made sense. It looked expensive, but she said it casually. I didn't ask more. Didn't want to seem insecure. Then there was the canceled trip. We'd been planning a weekend in Asheville, just the two of us, a quiet getaway. We hadn't had one since Zoe was born. The Airbnb was booked, the sitter lined up. 3 days before we were supposed to go, Leah told me she had to back out. A last-minute opportunity had come up, an industry dinner with some really high-level names, she said. It was a chance she couldn't miss. "I hate to do this," she said, touching my arm. "But this one really matters." I smiled. Said I understood. I canceled the Airbnb. Took Zoe to the zoo instead. We ate soft pretzels and watched flamingos for an hour. It was a good day. But that night, after she texted me a picture of the dinner table, white linen, full glasses, smiling faces, I stared at it longer than I needed to. She was wearing the bracelet. Again, nothing wrong. Just, a detail that stuck. A repetition. A whisper in the back of my mind that hadn't been there before. I didn't doubt her. But I started noticing things I used to ignore. Not because I didn't trust her. But because I realized, for the first time, I hadn't been paying close enough attention. I started waking up before Leah. It wasn't on purpose. I'd open my eyes before sunrise, listen for her breathing, and sometimes realize she wasn't there. I'd find her downstairs, laptop open, earbuds in, face lit by the cold glow of her screen. When I asked what she was working on, she'd always answer vaguely, client emails, scheduling, strategy sessions. I didn't push. But I noticed she started closing her laptop whenever I walked into the room. She was still affectionate in small ways. Still smiled when we kissed. Still brushed Zoe's hair before school and made French toast on Sundays. But it felt like she was operating in a second layer of life. Something thinner. Just out of reach. The bracelet was always on her wrist now. Not every day, but often. I never saw it on the bathroom counter. Never tangled in her jewelry tray. It was like it had become permanent, part of her uniform. That wouldn't have meant anything on its own. But more and more, things weren't adding up. She'd say she was having lunch with a client and come home without leftovers, even though she always boxed her food. She'd mention meetings that didn't appear on her public calendar. A name would slip into a story. "Michael said that new branding firm is really aggressive," but I didn't know a Michael. When I asked who he was, she just said, "Oh, someone new in the industry," and moved on. One night, I heard her laughing in the kitchen while I was upstairs reading to Zoe. A deep, belly laugh, the kind she used to save for something real. I thought maybe she was on the phone with her sister, but when I came down, the kitchen was dark. Her phone screen lit up as she quickly locked it and set it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked. She smiled. "Yeah. Just a dumb group chat." It was plausible. A dozen things were plausible. But when enough small shadows pile up, even a well-lit room starts to feel dim. I told myself I was overthinking it. That we were just going through a busy phase. That this was what success looked like, distance, schedules, long silences filled with meaning only the other person could decode. But something kept whispering that I was missing something. That I was one page behind in a story I thought I was co-authoring. We were still intimate. Not as often, but it hadn't disappeared. When we were together, it felt good, natural. But afterward, she'd often roll away quickly, pull on a robe, check her phone. There was a kind of urgency to her now, like she was always racing towards something I couldn't see. I thought about asking her directly. About sitting her down and telling her what I was feeling. But I didn't know what to say. I didn't have a smoking gun. I didn't even have a reason. Just the weight of noticing. The pressure of small things. The sense that the woman beside me still looked like my wife, still sounded like my wife, but wasn't quite all here anymore. Like part of her had slipped through my fingers when I wasn't looking. It's a strange thing, realizing your life has shifted and nobody told you. There was no argument. No slammed door. No dramatic shift in tone. And yet, I started noticing the pauses. The silences. The moments when Leah would walk into a room and forget to look at me. The way she used to reach for my hand without thinking, but now only did when we were in public. She had another out-of-town trip coming up, 3 days in Miami for a private leadership forum. She said it was small, invite only, no press, just roundtables and networking dinners with key people. I asked who organized it. She gave me a name I didn't recognize. When I Googled it later, nothing came up. I didn't say anything. I just nodded like I believed it. The morning she left, she was distracted. She kissed Zoe goodbye twice, like she was trying to overcompensate. She barely looked at me when I walked her to the car. I'll call you tonight, she said, tossing her bag into the back seat. I watched her drive away, a strange hollowness in my chest. That evening, no call came. I texted her around 9:30. All good? No reply. I sat on the couch, phone in my hand, the TV still running with a show I wasn't watching. At 10:48, she finally responded, long dinner. Exhausted. Talk tomorrow. Love you. I stared at those words for a long time. The next morning, Zoe asked where mommy was. I told her Miami. She nodded like it meant nothing. Kids accept whatever you give them. They assume the grown-ups have it under control. I went through my day in a kind of fog. Work meetings. Lunch alone. A quiet drive home. I found myself checking her Instagram. No posts. No stories. I checked her agency's page. Nothing recent. She was usually quick to post updates from big events, even if it was just a quick snapshot of a name badge or a skyline. This time, it was like she'd disappeared. That night, I found her perfume still hanging faintly on the pillow. A scent I used to love. Now it felt like a placeholder. Like something she left behind in case I needed convincing she was still here. The next day she texted a photo of a beachside lunch. Glass table, sparkling water, one plate half-eaten. She was cropped out. Finally got some sun, the message said. I stared at the photo. Something about it unsettled me. Not the food. Not the empty chair across from the plate. Just the way it was framed, too casual, too impersonal. Like it was meant to be seen, not shared. When she came home, she brought gifts, sunglasses for Zoe, a polo shirt for me. We had dinner. Laughed. Talked about Miami in vague terms. Busy but good, she said. Lots of smart people. When I asked who stood out, she said, too many to name. She smiled through it. Warm. Present. But behind her eyes, something flickered, something tired. Or guarded. That night, lying in bed next to her, I stared at the ceiling and realized, I didn't believe her. And worse than that, I didn't know who to tell. It was a Thursday morning when I saw it. I was in the kitchen, packing Zoe's lunch while she sat at the counter eating cereal, humming to herself. The news was playing in the background, low volume, just background noise, until I heard Leah's name. I froze. Looked up at the screen. There she was. Big sunglasses, wind in her hair, a long white dress rippling around her legs as she stepped off a yacht in Capri. Not with her team. Not with any industry peers. With him. Daniel Crane. I knew who he was the second I saw him. You couldn't live in DC and not know. Tech billionaire, media darling, donor to half the political campaigns in the capital, and casually involved in philanthropic lobbying, whatever that meant. 47, twice divorced, omnipresent in Forbes and Vanity Fair profiles. And there he was, shirt unbuttoned, sunglasses on, one hand resting gently on the small of Leah's back as she leaned in to say something, smiling like she didn't have a husband, a daughter, or a goddamn reality to come home to. The segment cut to shaky, zoomed-in video from a beach club. The two of them laughing over drinks. Reclining side by side on lounge chairs. Kissing. Kissing. I don't remember what I dropped, but I heard the plastic container hit the tile. Zoe looked up. You okay, Daddy? I turned off the TV with the remote, my hand shaking slightly. Yeah, sweetheart. Just spilled something. I walked into the bathroom and closed the door behind me. My heart was beating so hard I felt it in my throat. The headline was already all over Twitter, Daniel Crane seen vacationing with DC power couple's wife. The article used her full name. They even included a snippet from her website bio, Leah C., founder of Cobalt Agency, mother of one, based in Arlington. I sat on the floor, back against the cold tub, scrolling through it all. The photos weren't grainy. They weren't up for interpretation. They were sharp, clear, published by 3 major outlets within the hour. She wasn't hiding. She hadn't even tried. My wife, my life, had taken a vacation with one of the most photographed men on the East Coast and somehow convinced herself I'd never know. Or worse, maybe she didn't care if I did. She was supposed to be in Miami. Supposed to be at a leadership forum. Instead, she'd been sailing the Amalfi Coast, drinking wine on billionaires' decks, leaning into a man who didn't even have the decency to look discreet. The betrayal wasn't just personal now. It was public. Her phone buzzed later that morning. I didn't answer it. I let it ring, screen glowing with her name, over and over. She hadn't even tried to warn me. No call. No message. Not even a lie to buy herself time. She didn't know I'd seen everything. But I had. And now, so had everyone else. By the time Leah finally called me, the headlines had already spread beyond gossip columns. It wasn't just celebrity blogs anymore, it was Politico, The Post, Bloomberg. Most of them still danced around the details, calling it a rumored romance between a married marketing executive and Daniel Crane, the billionaire tech mogul with a taste for influence and a history of making inconvenient stories vanish. Only this time, the story wasn't going anywhere. The photos were too clear. The footage too undeniable. Her hand in his. Her laugh. Her presence in every frame, like someone who hadn't just left a life behind but torched it on the way out. She called 3 times. I let each one ring. Then came the message, please call me. It's not what it looks like. We need to talk. I didn't need to talk. I needed the truth to keep spreading. That night, after putting Zoe to bed and pacing the kitchen for a solid half hour, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and posted. I didn't rant. I didn't throw accusations. I told the truth, plainly and deliberately. I confirmed that Leah and I were married. That she had recently returned from what she told me was a professional trip. That I, like everyone else, had learned from the media that she had instead been on vacation with Daniel Crane. That we had a child, a home, a life, one she had chosen to walk away from without a word. I didn't tag her. I didn't mention our daughter. But I didn't hold back either. I hit post and closed the laptop. By the time I woke up the next morning, it had exploded. Hundreds of comments. Private messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Journalists. Legal bloggers. PR professionals. Most offered support. Some asked for interviews. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't doing this for attention. I was doing it to make sure Leah and Crane knew they weren't invisible. But I wasn't finished. What Crane hadn't considered, what Leah hadn't considered, was that I knew people too. Not the same kind, not billionaires or party donors, but people who understood how DC actually runs. Lobbyists. Researchers. Former staffers. Quiet professionals who've been burned by men like Crane and remembered it. So I started making calls. Casual at first, "Hey, do you know how Crane keeps landing those no-bid contracts? Ever look into the shell companies tied to his consulting groups?" It didn't take much to stir the water. Within a week, I had people coming to me. One woman sent me a PDF, emails between Crane's team and a regulatory office. Another sent over meeting notes from a subcommittee hearing that mysteriously never made it to public record. Patterns began forming. Threads that led to dark corners of Crane's empire, the kind of lobbying that doesn't just grease wheels, it rewrites the rules. And now, with Leah's face splashed across headlines beside his, the world was watching. She chose power. She chose secrecy. She chose him. And now, I was choosing consequences. I didn't make a dramatic move. No press conference, no midnight leak. Just a series of well-placed conversations with the right people, quiet, experienced professionals who knew exactly what to do with the information I'd helped collect. It started with a journalist I trusted, someone I knew from college who had built a solid reputation investigating government contracts and lobbying practices. I didn't need to explain everything. I just forwarded the files, gave him a few key names to call, and asked him to keep me out of the narrative. "Don't worry," he said. "You won't be in the story." But he will. The piece dropped 10 days later. Daniel Crane, billionaire, power broker, and now, alleged architect of a multi-tier lobbying network that funneled millions through shell nonprofits and advisory committees to quietly rewrite policy in favor of his holdings. It was all there: fund transfers, hidden affiliations, congressional staff connections, strategic campaign donations tied directly to legislative influence. It didn't take long for the dominoes to fall. First came the subpoenas. Then the resignations. By the end of the week, 2 sitting representatives publicly distanced themselves from Crane. The SEC opened an inquiry. His publicist issued a canned denial, followed by silence. The photos of Leah and Crane on the yacht were still floating around, now republished next to headlines like, "Crane under scrutiny for corruption and covert influence." She wasn't just a mistress anymore, she was part of the scandal. Leah tried to reach out again. This time through my sister, then a mutual friend. She claimed she hadn't known about Crane's dealings, that she was blindsided, that she wanted to explain. But her image was already cracked. Clients dropped her agency. A keynote was quietly cancelled. She shut down her professional social media accounts by the end of the month. I didn't respond to her messages. We filed for divorce officially, and I made it public. Not with another post, just through the court records. She tried to negotiate privately. Said she didn't want Zoe affected by the media circus. I reminded her that she had boarded the yacht without once looking back. Zoe asked fewer questions than I expected. Kids have an instinct for truth, even when no one says it aloud. She still asks about her mom sometimes. I keep my answers simple and honest. She made some choices that hurt people. But that doesn't mean she stopped loving you. It's the only thing I'll protect her from. The rest? The fallout? That's Leah's to carry. As for Crane, last I heard, he'd stepped down, temporarily, from 3 of his boards and was limiting his public visibility. His team claimed it was about mental health. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was about knowing his power had limits, and that someone finally found them. I didn't feel victorious. Just, done. They thought they could do this quietly. That the rest of us, husbands, voters, citizens, would just keep looking the other way. But not this time. They built something rotten. All I did was pull back the curtain. The house feels quieter now. Not empty, just honest. The kind of silence that doesn't weigh you down. For the first time in months, I can walk from one room to the next without holding my breath. Leah moved her things out weeks ago. There wasn't much left to take. Most of her presents had already been erased by headlines, court filings, and the unspoken shame that comes from being exposed not just as unfaithful, but as careless. Her agency folded. The news cycle moved on. Crane's legal battles deepened. A few former allies flipped. A closed-door hearing turned public. His face started to disappear from the magazines, replaced by newer scandals. It always goes that way. I stayed out of it. I let the media tear into him. Let the facts speak louder than I ever could. I didn't need to relive it, and I didn't need to justify anything I did. Everyone who mattered knew the truth. That was enough. Zoe adjusted better than I expected. She still draws pictures with all three of us in them sometimes, which stings more than I'd admit, but I hang them on the fridge anyway. We talk about her mom when she wants to. I never feed her anger. Just the truth. Filtered, but clear. I've learned to be okay with saying, some people make choices they can't take back. And I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Or returning. Sometimes it just means letting go of the weight. I started running again. Just a couple miles a morning. It's not about fitness, it's about rhythm. Breathing. Control. I forgot how much I missed having the road to myself before the world wakes up. Friends still check in. They keep their tone careful, but I can tell they're not sure what version of me they'll get. I try to put them at ease. I'm not broken. Just recalibrated. I don't need pity. What I need is space, and I've got that now. Some weekends, Zoe and I drive out to the Shenandoah trails. We bring sandwiches, hike until our legs hurt, then sit on a flat rock and listen to the wind in the trees. She'll rest her head on my shoulder, and in those moments, it all feels far away. The yacht. The press. The man who thought he could buy anything. There's talk of a book about Crane's fall. Someone emailed me about contributing my side. I said no. My story's already been told, loud enough, clear enough. I'm not interested in being part of someone else's ending. What I care about now is what comes next. There's a difference between surviving and moving forward. I've done the first. I'm learning the second. One day at a time. One bedtime story at a time. One quiet morning in a house I've reclaimed, scrubbed clean not of memories, but of illusions. She thought I'd never see it coming. But I did. Eventually. And when I did, I ended it. Now. I'm still standing. And I'm not looking back.